What if the first scene took 6 months of prep just for a mosquito? Or the lead vampire scared real hitchhikers while method acting in full costume between takes? From bizarre feuds with Swedish censors demanding record-breaking cuts to James Cameron giving the finger in an uncredited cameo, Near Dark is packed with stranger-than-fiction behind-the-scenes stories that rival its vampire mayhem. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Near Dark. Fact 1. A real mosquito took 6 months to grow. The very first shot of Near Dark features a close-up of a mosquito biting the main character, Caleb, and creating that brief moment turned out to be one of the most elaborate and time-consuming aspects of the entire production. Director Catherine Bigelow revealed in the DVD commentary that the filmmakers needed to ensure the mosquito used in the scene was completely free from any contaminants or diseases that could potentially harm actor Adrian Pasdar during filming. Since they couldn't just capture a random mosquito from outside and risk exposing the actor to unknown pathogens, the production team made the unusual decision to raise their own mosquito specifically for the movie. This wasn't a quick process by any means. The crew had to grow the mosquito from scratch in a controlled environment, carefully monitoring its development through every stage of its life cycle to guarantee it remained disease-free and safe for direct contact with human skin. From egg to larva to pupa, and finally to adult mosquito. The entire breeding and growing process took a full 6 months to complete. That means before a single frame of the movie was shot, before any actors were in makeup or any sets were built, the production was already dedicated to nurturing this tiny insect that would appear on screen for just a few seconds. The painstaking effort reflects the level of detail and commitment Bigelow brought to every aspect of Near Dark, even down to the smallest creatures. While most viewers probably assumed the opening mosquito bite was achieved through special effects or editing tricks, it was actually a real insect that had been raised with the same care and attention you might give to training an animal actor. The fact that half a year of preparation went into capturing one brief shot of an insect feeding demonstrates just how seriously the filmmakers took authenticity, creating a genuine interaction between actor and mosquito, rather than relying on movie magic. Fact 2. Lance Henriksen terrorized real people in character. Lance Henriksen took method acting to an extreme level while working on Near Dark, turning the quiet moments between filming into his own twisted social experiment. The actor didn't just play Jesse the vampire leader on camera, he stayed in character during his downtime, driving around the Arizona desert in full costume and makeup, actively seeking out unsuspecting strangers to terrify. Henriksen had created an elaborate backstory for Jesse, and imagining him as a former Confederate Navy sailor who became a vampire during a bloody naval battle in the 1860s. And he wanted to embody that character as completely as possible. To achieve Jesse's weathered ancient appearance, Henriksen painted his hair black with actual tar, which was a historical practice that real seamen used in the 1800s. He also wore broken fake fingernails that looked like exposed finger bones extending from his hands, giving him a genuinely unsettling appearance. Rather than removing this disturbing getup between takes, Henriksen would hop in his car and cruise the desert roads looking for hitchhikers, picking them up while fully committed to his vampire persona. The encounters were reportedly so convincing that at least one hitchhiker, described as being twice Henriksen's size, became visibly frightened and demanded to be let out of the vehicle as soon as they reached the first inhabited area. In what might be the strangest detail of all, Henriksen actually paid this terrified hitchhiker $80 in cash for being what he called a good sport about the whole experience, never revealing that he was just an actor preparing for a role. Henriksen himself later joked that he was lucky during these excursions because any of these hitchhikers could have easily overpowered him and, in his words, made him cry like a baby. According to both Henriksen and his co-star Bill Paxton, this wasn't an isolated incident. The actor made multiple trips in character, testing out his vampire persona on real people throughout the production, all in service of creating the most authentic and menacing performance possible. At Fact 3, Bill Paxton pranked train workers in gore makeup. Bill Paxton took his role as the psychotic vampire Severin so seriously that he continued terrorizing people even when the cameras stopped rolling. And one of his most memorable pranks involved an unsuspecting railroad worker who had no idea he was about to encounter something straight out of a nightmare. During the filming of Near Dark in Arizona, the cast and crew had to deal with a train that would stop at the same intersection every single night, which became a regular interruption to their shooting schedule. One evening, Paxton saw his opportunity when one of the train workers stepped out of the diesel engine during one of these stops, and he decided it was the perfect moment to have a little fun while still wearing his full vampire makeup, in which included prosthetics that made it look like half of his face had been violently ripped off with exposed flesh and gore. Without breaking character, Paxton walked straight up to the completely unsuspecting railway employee and said in an urgent tone, "Hey man, there's been an accident," gesturing to his horrifically mutilated face as if he had just survived some terrible disaster and desperately needed help. The reaction from the train worker was apparently priceless. As you can imagine, the sheer terror of someone approaching you in the middle of the night in a remote desert location with what appeared to be catastrophic facial injuries. According to the stories shared by cast members, this wasn't just a quick joke, but rather part of a pattern of pranks that Paxton pulled throughout the production, on often staying in character and using his gruesome appearance to shock locals and crew members alike. Lance Henriksen later shared that Paxton had a dark sense of humor that perfectly matched his character Severin's twisted personality, and these off-camera antics helped him maintain the menacing energy that made his performance so memorable and terrifying on screen. Fact 4. It was originally a Western film. When Kathryn Bigelow sat down with co-writer Eric Red to develop Near Dark, vampires were the last thing on their minds. The pair actually wanted to create a traditional Western drawn to the genre's iconic imagery of dusty landscapes, lone drifters, and the lawless frontier spirit. Bigelow had a clear vision for a Western film that would explore themes of survival and morality in the harsh American landscape. But there was just one massive problem standing in their way. Nobody wanted to finance a Western in the mid-1980s. The genre had fallen out of favor with studios and audiences alike, making it nearly impossible to secure the budget they needed. After hitting wall after wall trying to get their Western project off the ground, Bigelow and Red realized they needed to pivot if they wanted to see their film actually get made. That's when they came up with a creative solution that would change everything. They decided to take the core DNA of their Western concept and merge it with something far more marketable at the time: the vampire genre. The mid-1980s had seen a resurgence of vampire films, with movies like Fright Night in 1985 proving there was a hungry audience for fresh takes on bloodsuckers. By grafting vampire mythology onto their Western framework, Bigelow and Red created something that satisfied both their artistic vision and the financial realities of Hollywood. The gamble worked, and they secured funding for what would become Near Dark. What makes this origin story so fascinating is that you can see both genres fighting for dominance throughout the entire film. The vampire gang travels in a beaten-up RV across desolate southwestern landscapes that look straight out of a classic Western. The characters have the rough, nomadic quality of outlaws on the run, and Jesse even explicitly states he fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War, making him a literal relic of the Old West. The bar massacre scene plays out like a saloon shootout, and the film's moral framework, survive or perish, comes straight from frontier justice. Near Dark became the Western Bigelow always wanted to make, just with fangs instead of 6 shooters. Fact 5. 3 alien stars. Reunited by James Cameron's suggestion. When Kathryn Bigelow was casting Near Dark in 1986, she faced a challenge that many first-time directors encounter. How do you find actors who can convincingly portray a tight-knit group of nomadic vampires who've been traveling together for decades? The answer came from an unexpected source: her then-boyfriend James Cameron, who had just finished directing one of the biggest science fiction hits of the decade. Cameron suggested that Bigelow should consider using some of the actors from his film Aliens, which had been released earlier that same year. And the idea turned out to be brilliant. Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton, and Jeanette Goldstein had all worked together on Cameron's space horror thriller, and they had developed a natural chemistry and shorthand with each other during that production. When they reunited for Near Dark, that established dynamic became one of the film's greatest strengths, making the vampire clan feel like they truly had been together for over a century. The three actors brought more than just their talent to the vampire western. They brought what Bill Paxton later described as a baptism of fire experience from working with Cameron on Aliens, which had forged them into something of an acting family unit. Paxton said that coming to Near Dark after Aliens felt like a homecoming because he was reunited with Henriksen and Goldstein. This real-world connection translated perfectly to the screen, where their characters needed to feel like they had an unbreakable bond, forged through years of killing and surviving together. Interestingly, there was a fourth Aliens actor who was also considered for Near Dark. Michael Biehn, who played Corporal Hicks in Cameron's film, was offered the role of Jesse Hooker, the leader of the vampire gang, but he turned it down because he found the script confusing. That role ultimately went to Lance Henriksen, and Biehn later admitted it was one of the few roles he genuinely regretted passing on, especially after seeing how the film became a cult classic over the years. At Fact 6. The word vampire is never spoken. One of the most striking creative choices in Near Dark is something most viewers don't even notice on their first watch. The word vampire is never spoken once throughout the entire film. Despite being unquestionably a vampire movie with all the classic elements like bloodsucking, aversion to sunlight, superhuman strength, and immortality, director Catherine Bigelow and co-writer Eric Red deliberately avoided using the V word at any point in the script. This wasn't an accident or oversight, but rather a conscious decision that set Near Dark apart from every other vampire film of its era and helped establish its gritty, unconventional tone. The filmmakers wanted to strip away the traditional Gothic mythology that had dominated vampire cinema for decades and create something that felt raw and real rather than supernatural and theatrical. By refusing to use the word vampire, Bigelow forced audiences to experience the horror and reality of the situation without the baggage of folklore and legend. The characters in the film simply refer to themselves as a family or gang, and they never discuss crosses, garlic, stakes, or any of the classic vampire hunting tools. In fact, the film goes even further by showing Jesse, the patriarch vampire played by Lance Henriksen, using a pistol decorated with a cross, completely ignoring traditional vampire mythology. This approach extended to other aspects of the film as well. You never see fangs in Near Dark, only brutal, animalistic biting. The vampires don't transform into bats or turn into mist. They're just predators who need blood to survive and burn in sunlight. By avoiding the word and the traditional trappings, Bigelow created a vampire film that felt more like a western or a road movie populated by dangerous drifters who just happen to be immortal killers. This subtle but radical choice helped Near Dark stand out from other vampire films of 1987 and contributed to its lasting reputation as one of the most original takes on the vampire genre ever made. Fact 7. James Cameron has an uncredited cameo. One of the most entertaining hidden details in Near Dark involves a blink-and-you'll-miss-it appearance by one of Hollywood's biggest directors, according to Bill Paxton. The driver who flips off his character Severin while he's hitchhiking on a lonely desert road is none other than James Cameron, the legendary director behind The Terminator and Aliens. Cameron happened to be visiting the set that day when director Catherine Bigelow was filming the hitchhiking sequence, and he decided to jump into the scene for a quick, uncredited cameo that would go completely unnoticed by audiences for years. The moment happens during one of Severin's more darkly comedic scenes, where Bill Paxton's vampire character is trying to hitch a ride along a desolate stretch of highway. As a vehicle approaches, instead of stopping to help, the driver simply extends his middle finger out the window and keeps on driving, leaving Severin standing there in the dust. It's a brief moment that perfectly captures the film's blend of horror and pitch-black humor. But what makes it truly special is knowing that the person behind the wheel was Cameron himself, essentially giving his friend Bill Paxton the finger in front of the camera. This cameo is particularly meaningful given the close connections between Near Dark and Cameron's work. Bigelow and Cameron were dating at the time of filming and would later marry in 1989. Cameron had also been instrumental in helping Bigelow cast the film, suggesting that she use 3 of his Aliens actors, Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton, and Jeanette Goldstein, who had just finished working together on his sci-fi masterpiece the year before. The chemistry these three actors developed on Aliens transferred seamlessly to Near Dark, where they played members of the nomadic vampire clan. Cameron's willingness to make a silly cameo while visiting his girlfriend's set shows the playful, collaborative spirit that existed behind the scenes, even as the cast and crew were creating one of the darkest and most violent vampire films of the 1980s. Fact 8. Filmed in winter, but set in summer Near Dark, takes place during the sweltering heat of an Oklahoma summer, with characters meeting outside ice cream parlors and driving through sun-baked landscapes, but the actual filming happened during some of the coldest months of the year. The production was originally scheduled to shoot on location in Oklahoma, but severe flooding forced the crew to relocate at the last minute to Arizona, specifically to the small towns of Coolidge, Florence, and Casa Grande. The filming began in mid-November of 1986 and continued through the late autumn and early winter months, when temperatures in the Arizona desert dropped dramatically after sunset. This created a significant challenge for the cast, especially for Jenny Wright, who plays the vampire May in her character's sleeveless summer shirt and minimal clothing throughout the opening scenes. Director Kathryn Bigelow noted in her DVD commentary that Wright was absolutely freezing during the night shoots, shivering between takes while trying to maintain the illusion of a warm summer evening. The crew had to work quickly during these scenes to capture the footage before the actors became too uncomfortable from the cold. One of the most unusual solutions involved the actors holding ice cubes in their mouths between takes and even during some shots. In the frigid night air, every time the actors exhaled, their breath would create visible vapor clouds, which would have completely destroyed the summer setting illusion. By keeping ice in their mouths, the actors could cool their breath enough to prevent the telltale steam from appearing on camera. This uncomfortable technique had to be repeated throughout the numerous night scenes that make up the majority of the film. Despite being set during summer, the production schedule required about 1/3 of the shooting days to take place during the brief magic hour periods just before sunrise and just after sunset, when the natural light created the perfect atmosphere for the vampire story. As these golden hour sessions meant the cast and crew were working during the coldest parts of the desert day, making the temperature difference between the film setting and the actual shooting conditions even more extreme. Fact 9. Swedish censors demanded record-breaking cuts. When Near Dark was set to be released in Sweden in 1988, the film ran into serious trouble with Swedish film censors who had a reputation for being extremely strict about violent content. The censorship board demanded that the distributor cut a total of 9 minutes from the film before it could be shown in Swedish theaters, which was an enormous amount of footage to remove from a 94-minute movie. What made this situation even more unusual was that the censors wanted one single continuous scene to be cut by 5.5 minutes, which, according to reports at the time, was one of the longest single cuts on record for any film going through the Swedish censorship process. The Swedish distributor, a man named Conny Planborg, was understandably upset about these demands, because cutting that much material would essentially gut some of the film's most important sequences and make the story difficult to follow. He appealed directly to the Swedish government to try to reduce the magnitude of the edits, arguing that the cuts were excessive and would destroy the artistic integrity of the film. The final decision about how much of the film would actually be edited before release rested with Bengt Göransson, who was Sweden's Minister of Culture at the time, but his ruling hadn't been determined when the story was first reported in The Hollywood Reporter in September of 1988. The scenes that the censors wanted to remove were primarily from the infamous bar massacre sequence, where the vampire gang methodically kills everyone in a roadside bar in one of the film's most violent and disturbing scenes. This sequence had already caused Near Dark to nearly receive an X rating in the United States, before director Kathryn Bigelow made some minor cuts to secure an R rating instead. The Swedish censors felt that the violence was too graphic and had what they called a brutalizing effect on audiences. Eventually, Near Dark was released on video in Sweden in 1989, but the version that Swedish viewers got to see was heavily cut with almost all of the violence removed, and including the entire bar initiation sequence that many consider essential to understanding the film's story. Fact 10. Actors were timed on creating blackouts. One of the most unusual aspects of preparing for Near Dark involved turning the actors into expert vampire survival specialists, and director Kathryn Bigelow took this training incredibly seriously. Since the vampires in the film are constantly racing against sunrise and need to block out deadly sunlight wherever they hide, the cast had to become genuinely fast and efficient at creating total darkness in any environment they found themselves in. Rather than just choreographing these scenes loosely, Bigelow and her crew treated the entire process like a military operation, complete with stopwatches and competition among the actors to see who could seal off a space the fastest. And the training sessions involved various locations that appear in the film, including the cramped interior of the Winnebago that serves as the vampire gang's mobile home, motel rooms where they take shelter during daylight hours, and other confined spaces. The actors would rush in and frantically cover windows, seal cracks, and block every possible source of sunlight using whatever materials were available, from blankets and aluminum foil to duct tape and cardboard. What started as a chaotic process taking several minutes gradually became a streamlined operation as the cast practiced over and over again, with Bigelow timing each attempt and encouraging them to shave seconds off their performance. According to the director's commentary, the actors eventually got their blackout times down from several minutes to under 2 minutes, which gave the scenes an authentic sense of urgency and desperation that you can feel throughout the movie. This wasn't just about looking good on camera, but about making the actors genuinely understand the life-or-death stakes their characters faced every single day. The competitive element also helped the cast bond and added a layer of realism to their performances, since they actually knew how to execute these survival tactics rather than just pretending. This attention to detail shows in the final film, where the blackout sequences feel genuinely frantic and believable rather than staged or artificial. Fact 11. Michael Biehn rejected the lead role. Michael Biehn, the actor who played the tough Marine Corporal Hicks in Aliens and the heroic Kyle Reese in The Terminator, was actually offered a major role in Near Dark. But he turned it down in a decision that would haunt him for years to come. Director Kathryn Bigelow wanted Biehn to play Jesse Hooker, the leader of the vampire gang who claims to have fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War, making him over 100 years old. This would have been a perfect reunion, since Biehn had just worked with 3 of the other Near Dark cast members on James Cameron's Aliens the year before, and the chemistry was already there. But when Biehn read the script, something didn't click for him, and he passed on the role because he found it too confusing to follow. In interviews years later, Biehn explained that he's a very linear person who needs to see a clear beginning, middle, and end in a story, and if the scenes don't make sense to him in that order, it becomes really hard for him to commit to the project. He mentioned that he had similar problems with movies like Memento and Irreversible because of their nonlinear storytelling and flashback structures, and Near Dark's script gave him that same uncomfortable feeling. Looking back on the decision, Biehn has openly admitted it was a mistake and one of the few roles he genuinely regrets turning down. He said he would have loved to work with Kathryn Bigelow, who went on to become a brilliant filmmaker with movies like Point Break and eventually won an Academy Award for The Hurt Locker. In fact, Biehn revealed that Bigelow later called him about playing the Patrick Swayze role in Point Break, but he passed on that one too, making it a double missed opportunity to collaborate with the talented director. The role of Jesse eventually went to Lance Henriksen, who delivered an iconic performance that helped make Near Dark the cult classic it is today. Fact 12. Johnny Depp auditioned for a role before. Johnny Depp became one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He auditioned for a role in Near Dark alongside another young actor named D.B. Sweeney. This was back in 1986, during the early stages of Depp's acting career, when he was still relatively unknown in the film industry. At that time, Depp had only appeared in a handful of projects, most notably his debut role in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 years earlier in 1984, where he played one of Freddy Krueger's victims. According to production records, both Depp and Sweeney were auditioning for the lead role of Caleb Colton, the young farm boy who gets seduced by a beautiful vampire and reluctantly joins her nomadic family of bloodsuckers. The part ultimately went to Adrian Pasdar, who was best known at the time for his role in the science fiction film Solar Babies. It's interesting to imagine how different Near Dark might have been with Depp in the starring role, especially considering the dark, brooding intensity he would later bring to characters in films like Edward Scissorhands and Sweeney Todd. At the time of his Near Dark audition, Depp was just beginning to establish himself as an actor after originally pursuing a career as a musician, and he wouldn't achieve widespread fame until he was cast in the television series 21 Jump Street in 1987, the same year Near Dark was released. D.B. Sweeney, the other actor who auditioned alongside Depp, would go on to appear in films like The Cutting Edge and 8 Men Out. While neither actor landed the role in Near Dark, both went on to have successful careers in Hollywood, though Depp obviously became the more famous of the two. The fact that director Kathryn Bigelow considered these actors shows she was looking at emerging talent for her vampire western, even if they didn't quite fit her vision for the character of Caleb. Fact 13. Crushed by the Lost Boys at box office, Near Dark had the terrible misfortune of being released in October of 1987, just 2 months after Joel Schumacher's The Lost Boys hit theaters in July of that same year. While both films featured vampires and teenage protagonists getting pulled into the undead lifestyle, The Lost Boys arrived first with the full force of Warner Brothers behind it, opening on 1,542 screens across the country. Near Dark, by contrast, was an independent film distributed by the struggling De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, and it limped into theaters on just 262 screens with almost no advertising or promotional support. The result was absolutely devastating for Kathryn Bigelow's vampire western. On its opening weekend, Near Dark earned a modest $635,000, which put it nowhere near the top 10 at the box office. The Lost Boys, meanwhile, had already become a cultural phenomenon with its MTV-style visuals, rock soundtrack, and cast of young heartthrobs including Kiefer Sutherland and the two Coreys. By the time Near Dark disappeared from theaters, it had earned only $3.4 million total against its $5 million budget, making it a financial failure. The Lost Boys, on the other hand, raked in over $32 million domestically and became one of the defining vampire movies of the 1980s. Director Kathryn Bigelow later acknowledged that her film simply couldn't compete, explaining that The Lost Boys was a vampire movie made by Warner Brothers that had a tremendous amount of distribution and marketing muscle behind it, while Near Dark was just a little whisper out there in comparison. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the vastly different tones of the two films meant that audiences who had already gotten their vampire fix from the fun, stylish Lost Boys weren't interested in Near Dark's grittier, more violent approach to the genre. To make matters worse, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group went bankrupt in 1989, which meant Near Dark had virtually no chance of building an audience through re-releases or sustained promotion. It would take years of home video rentals and word of mouth before the film finally found its cult following. Fact 14. Lance Henriksen starved himself for the role. When Lance Henriksen took on the role of Jesse, the century-old Confederate vampire leading a nomadic gang of bloodsuckers across the American Southwest, he didn't just learn his lines and show up to set. Instead, he committed to one of the most intense method-acting transformations of his career, going to extreme lengths to embody a creature that had been undead for over 100 years. To achieve the gaunt, skeletal appearance that would make Jesse look truly ancient and otherworldly, Henriksen made the dangerous decision to stop eating, allowing his body to waste away until his chest bones became visibly prominent through his skin. This wasn't a director's request or a studio mandate, but rather Henriksen's own interpretation of what a vampire who had been stalking the night since the 1860s would actually look like after decades of existing on nothing but human blood. But the extreme weight loss was only part of Henriksen's dedication to staying in character. Rather than accepting rides to the set like most actors would, he insisted on driving himself to the filming locations each day, using that time alone behind the wheel to mentally prepare and remain in Jesse's mindset. This wasn't just about physical transformation, but about psychological immersion, keeping himself separate from the rest of the cast and crew to maintain the aura of an isolated, predatory creature. The result was a performance that felt genuinely unsettling, with Henriksen's naturally lean frame transformed into something that looked starved and dangerous. His commitment extended beyond the camera as well, as he would take drives through the desert between takes while still in full costume, complete with jagged fake fingernails and tar-blackened hair, sometimes even picking up hitchhikers just to stay in character and test the effectiveness of his transformation. Years later, Henriksen would cite Near Dark as his personal favorite film from his extensive career, suggesting that the extreme dedication was worth it, even if the methods were questionable by modern safety standards for actors. Fact 15. Smoking vampires used tobacco-filled harnesses. One of the biggest technical challenges facing the Near Dark production team was figuring out how to make vampires look like they were actually burning up in sunlight during extended sequences throughout the film. Special effects makeup artist Gordon Smith came up with an ingenious but incredibly uncomfortable solution that required the actors to essentially become walking smoke machines while they performed their scenes. The team designed elaborate prosthetic makeup pieces that concealed thin tubes running across the faces of the actors. And these tubes were also carefully hidden underneath the clothing of each performer so they wouldn't be visible on camera. All of these tubes connected to a special harness device that the actor wore on their body, and this device worked by smoking tobacco under high pressure to create the illusion of flesh burning and smoldering in the deadly sunlight. The system was complex enough that each actor had to learn how to operate their own personal valve that would shut off the tobacco smoke flow if they started feeling sick or nauseous from all the smoke being pumped around their face and body during filming. Director Catherine Bigelow explained in DVD commentary that when you watched the vampires burning in the movie from a distance in long shots, it genuinely looked like the figures were smoking and smoldering in the sunlight because of this practical effect. For the close-up shots where you could see the vampire's face being seared by sunlight, the production team constructed additional facial prosthetics that the smoke device tubes could run underneath, creating the terrifying illusion of skin actually smoking and burning right before your eyes. The technique worked so well that on one particular day when they were filming Homer's death scene, strong winds made the entire smoke device system completely useless, so the production team had no choice but to add the smoke and flames optically during post-production, instead using special effects. Despite the discomfort and complexity of wearing these tobacco-smoking harnesses for hours at a time during shooting, the practical effects they created became one of the most memorable and visceral elements of Near Dark's unique take on vampire mythology.